Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Cristina. Cristina, I checked how you spell this.
Uribe.
Uribe. I just didn't have the. I knew that it ended with bay, right? Uribe. And so Cristina is Colombian. You were adopted, but you were adopted by Colombian parents. Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a slightly different story than we often hear, where people are Colombian raised by American parents or the like. So when I spoke to Cristina, it's been a while. It's been like 6 weeks ago. We heard a little bit more about your story, and what we kind of came up with was for the frame of our conversation today were your epiphanies. So like these epiphanies, these are the big moments that change our world, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And the reason that we think that they're so big is because they do change our world. We live in a world where we think that strategies or actions are going to change our worlds. But if we don't do it, for me, the epiphany moments come when I realize that my beliefs, what I've believed has been to be true, isn't true. Mm-hmm. How do you see epiphanies? What does the word epiphany mean for you, Cristina?
Just a sudden realization of something that's been there all along, and you suddenly realize what it is.
Yeah. And I heard somebody say this, it's a natty little thing, right? A realization is seeing the world with real eyes. Yeah, real eyes. I love a little soundbite like that, because I think I have a tendency to talk too much. So if I can reduce it to a little soundbite like that and mind that, then that keeps me a little bit more succinct.
Perfect. Yeah.
So, do you remember your first epiphany? The first time you saw something that wasn't there for you before?
Yes, I remember shortly after my father died. I was adopted by two individuals that were almost 60 at the time. My parents had lived here in the States for a while, and then they went to Colombia to retire, essentially. And I realized the courage that my parents had. It's something that it's not that I took it for granted, but I didn't think about it. For my parents to have been that age, they adopted me. And then they brought me to the United States at the age of 4, and my dad started his business again, and they raised me here. And I think it's important to realize how courageous that truly is. You know, that was my first epiphany. It was after my father passed away.
Yeah. So courage, I think it comes from some Latin word for, because cœur is French for heart, la coeur, I think. Yeah. So I think that's where it comes from. So it's about having a strong heart, and I'm thinking about the Wizard of Oz, right? The strong, the strong heart to do something so different. I guess it's being out of our comfort zone, and you know that may be just like in a small way that might be coming on a podcast, right? Like where I saw something from on an adoptee forum saying, you know, I'm ready to go with my social media stuff, but how do I start? And it's, well, we just start. Or for me, I think it's when our desire to do something is bigger than our fear. So it's like it out trumps. Sorry to use the word trump. any listeners who are.
I'll forgive you this time.
Okay, yeah, we won't get into the politics. Yeah,
No.
it's when I guess he was. There must have been something driving his courage. What do you think it was then?
Well, both of them, both of my parents. My mom and dad never had children. They couldn't have children. And in fact, originally the person that was going to adopt me was their niece. And she took me to my adoptive parents' home one day and said, I need you to take care of her because I have to do something on the weekend. And my parents were like, we're not used to taking care of it. Like, I was one at the time. We're not used to taking care of little kids. They never gave me back.
Yeah.
Never gave me back. And I think their immense love for me trumped the fear of starting over again, because I mean, I believe that it was difficult. But my parents gave me a very good life.
Yeah. So how old were you when this first realization came to you?
Well, imagine, my dad died in 2017. I was 43.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, Simon, like, being adopted has always been like a part of my identity, so I haven't really thought about it. My parents, I always knew, I always knew the circumstances. I always knew, why it happened, etc. And so it just never really, like, it was just another part of myself, right?
Yeah.
I think after both of my parents died, and in my adoptive family, I do not have siblings, but in my biological family, I do.
Yeah.
I think I realized that once they were gone, they were gone. And with that came a whole bunch of, feelings and thoughts about my adoption.
Yeah. So people use this phrase, don't they? We use this phrase, coming out of the fog. Is that how you see it? Or was it something else? Or?
I was able to see things a little more clearly, possibly. I was able to, it was actually the second epiphany that allowed this, but I was able to realize why, when I was younger, why I did the things I did. Not that I had this salacious past, but why I was like a weird kid, right? I think that's what helped, lift that fog.
Yeah. Yeah. So because that's what people use the phrase self-aware, don't they, for that? Becoming self-aware. And for me, that kind of cuts both ways, because, not cuts both ways. It used to mean that, like, becoming aware of our behavior, like, so I can understand I can understand my behavior now. That's what I used to think self-aware was. But then I think for me, at some point, it became a deeper thing. So the self-aware, it's about understanding myself, understanding my identity. So it's about identity rather than kind of behavior stuff.
It was.
Yeah.
Understanding my identity more so. I mean, I think in my work as a psychotherapist with my clients, I learn about myself while I'm helping them. Certain things they tell me trigger an emotion. And this kind of, I guess, segues a little bit, if you don't mind, Simon.
Cool.
It segues into my second epiphany that happened, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 months ago.
Wow.
So I was eating lunch with my daughters. I have 2 daughters. One's 14, the other one's 4.5. And we were eating lunch at a restaurant. And my little one was taking a while to finish. So I was just staring at her while she was eating her French fries. And I said to my eldest, it just came out. I said, at her age, I had so much trauma.
Yeah.
I remember just like, and I'm not an emotional person, but I remember getting emotional in the restaurant because it was just like, it was kind of like the light bulb moment, right? Because, before I was adopted and my parents were getting everything ready for me to come here, I wasn't officially adopted yet, but I lived with my adoptive parents in Colombia, but my biological parents had the right to come and take me with them at times and things like that. And the intent wasn't to damage me, but it damaged me. Okay. Because I mean, at that point, I had already been in a home, for, I guess a foster home, if you want to call it that. And then I was taken by my adoptive parents' niece. Then I was taken by my adoptive parent. It was kind of like a bouncing little ball within, all these people. And that did me some damage. Again, it wasn't purposeful, but at that age, what do you know? Children thrive on routine and predictability, and I didn't have that predictability at times. Mm-hmm.
So maybe that was more of the coming out the fog moment, was it?
I would say so, yeah, because I mean, and again, like I said, that was just 4 months ago, and it's something that's gone through my mind repeatedly, and it explained a lot of things. For example, when I was younger, I thought I was a weird kid. I mean, I would lie. I was very jealous with my friends. I'm talking younger, like 10 years old, 12. And I used to, my gosh, Simon, I used to think back to how I was when I was younger. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Now I'm able to look back and think that those were trauma responses to trauma, responses to an anxious attachment, responses to being, passed around, and that really, I was able to see myself in a very different light.
Yeah. Wow, it's powerful, eh?
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting, but I would say that it's changed my life, because in making that realization, I was able to give myself or extend myself grace for many things. Our trauma can explain our behavior. It doesn't excuse it. But I realized why I was the way I was. And I was unaware. I think my parents, my adoptive parents, I think they thought that they could love the trauma out of me. And sadly, that's not how it works.
No. So what does grace mean to you?
Forgiveness, compassion, understanding.
Yeah. Because so many times we talk about those sorts of things in relation to other people.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's less usual for us to talk about ourselves. I heard a phrase last week, and I think it was drenched in compassion. Mm-hmm. That's really struck me, because it's quite an unusual kind of word, isn't it? Drenched. It's satiated. It's marinated. It's something. We're talking about something big, a big level of grace.
Yes.
So where do you think that grace has come from? Has the grace come from the understanding? What?
I think it comes from the understanding that I wasn't just this weird kid. It comes from the understanding that and I guess being a psychotherapist, I have a little bit more insight into it. But it comes from the understanding that I had trauma, and my trauma probably wasn't as big as other people's trauma, right? But this isn't the trauma Olympics. Trauma is trauma, and that was my personal trauma. And yes, I think that it comes from understanding that I wasn't weird because I was weird or defective. Rather, I was just responding to things that I didn't understand, to feelings that I had that I didn't understand, and things like that.
Yeah. So how has understanding this changed you?
Well, it's helped me forgive myself. I'm making it sound like my past is like this hellacious past. It's not. I'm talking about things like when I was like 10, 12, 13,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
stupid things, but that I was very embarrassed of, right? Um, I think, you know, this understanding, first of all, you know, it's allowed me to raise my self-esteem per se, and realize that it's not that I was just this weirdo. It was that I had trauma, you know, and I'm able to see myself in a different light, I suppose.
Yeah. So it's it sounds it sounds like there's something going on. All your training has kind of clicked in, has it? At this,
Oh yeah.
you've been have you been studying this, like you've been seeing this in kind of abstract, and you've been seeing it in other for in clients, and then something's clicked for you.
Right.
So you can go straight from coming out of the fog to seeing who you are. So it sounds like quite a fast recovery period to me. You see what I mean?
I would say so. You know, I mean, my adoptive parents gave me a wonderful life. They weren't perfect, but they were perfect for me. And you know, I'm also able to see them also, and extend them some grace for their mistakes, you know, because they're not perfect people. They made mistakes too, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so I think the fact that I'm a psychotherapist has helped me recover more quickly. I think I'm still in the recovery process, because I realize, Simon, that, you know, I'm mourning my parents now, and oh, I miss them dearly. I miss them. I miss them when they passed, but for some reason, since that epiphany, since that fog lifting, I miss them more. You know,
So is it about your increased level of sensitivity, or is it, I don't know, is it more like willingness to embrace tougher feelings, or what do you think's going on?
that's an interesting question. I think it's a combination of both. You know, the increased sensitivity to realizing what what shaped me, okay, and also this wanting to embrace them, um in a different way than I embraced them before. You see
Yeah,
what I mean? Kind of
yeah,
like
so,
now with a different and a deeper understanding.
yeah. It's huge, isn't it? Because
It is.
we were there's a sense that something was holding you back from the yeah the grief. Like, I think this is just me, right? I think I think I push tough stuff away.
Mm-hmm.
There's a concern that we're going to be that I'm going to drown in my feelings. That so we push them away, or we numb them,
Mm-hmm.
don't allow them. Had a great interview with a lady called Pamela Karanova, who was an adoptee who was an addict. I think it was 26, 27 years. And her epiphany moment was when she realized that she didn't need to try and push the trauma away. The alcohol was her way of numbing out. And,
Absolutely.
and she didn't see that for herself for 26, 27 years. And I think that's the same for all of us. A mentor of mine once said it's hard to see the picture when we're in where we're in the frame, when we're in the
Absolutely.
frame. So self-awareness is tough. It's very easy for people on the outside to see what's going on, but
Mm-hmm.
we have to see that stuff for ourselves.
Absolutely. And
And
one thing I tell my clients is, you know, a lot is you can numb these feelings, you can create a new life, you can move to Timbuktu. those feelings are going to follow you because they're inside. And some people, you know, eventually the cracks start to show and the feelings start to come out, and it could be something will trigger it, you know, and yes, and then it's a moment of self-awareness.
Yeah. That clarity.
That clarity.
Yeah. And so what we have to do then is we have to take your two daughters. If we're looking for more clarity, we've got to take your two daughters to a restaurant and just and have these moments. It's like that. It sounds like, well, there's no timetable for epiphanies, is there? There's no.
Absolutely. Absolutely not. I mean, like I said, you know, you can carry those feelings with you. You carry them with you. And I think that my epiphany moment was now, you know, and it's changed me. And I feel also, Simon, that it's matured me. It's matured me. Absolutely.
Matured you as in taking you away from that, the embarrassment of the 10, 11-year-old.
Yes, that matured me in the sense that I think I'm able to see others with more compassion. I would also say matured me as a mother.
Yeah.
You know, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did these two things, do you think, sit together? Like, so self-compassion and compassion for others. How does that work?
Well, I mean, I think it has a lot to do with empathy. I mean, knowing that, I mean, I know now what it feels like to have gone through trauma, right? So it also helps me realize, you know, that others that are going through the trauma or have gone through the trauma, you know, have felt pain. And I think that, you know, when you're self-aware, you know, you have that empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we see one of the things that I see it in that's stopped me from thriving has been more of a holding on and sometimes a resentment or fear, a lack of compassion for others has kind of been tough on me. So the thing that's coming to mind is a phrase I heard a few years ago. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, something like that.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, that's how it goes. So the compassion for ourselves washes over into our compassion for others. And so but I guess how can we use this for ourselves? How can we, what pointers would you suggest for me and the listeners in terms of that self-awareness piece and that exploration of our own resentment or pain for others? What could we do?
Well, one thing, you know, I think it's very important to, like I did with myself, extend yourself some grace. You know, feelings are just feelings. It's what you do with those feelings that matter. Resentment, it's a feeling. There's a reason for that feeling, right? Okay. And then, you know, exploring it, processing it, pulling it apart, seeing where it comes from, I think will help in the compassion. It will help also release it, you know, not judging your feelings. All of us have been resentful at some point or another, adopted or not, right? You know, don't judge your feelings. It's a human emotion, you know, and being forgiving with yourself for the feelings that you have.
Yeah. Because it sounds like that's what you're talking about really when we say forgiving ourselves. Mm-hmm. We're forgiving ourselves for our behavior, and we're forgiving ourselves for our feelings. I've never heard that before. And I'm a guy who used to worry about worrying, right? Be angry about being angry. It still gets me. But forgiving ourselves for our own feelings, that's
forgiving ourselves for, yes, because, for example, you know how many people come to my practice and they're like, oh my God, I felt envy towards this girl, this person. I feel so guilty about that. Okay. And I tell them, envy is a human emotion. Everyone's had it. It's what you do with that envy that determines certain things. You know, I can feel envious until I literally turn green. If I'm not doing anything with it, I'm not going to go and ruin somebody's life, the object of my envy. You know, understand why you feel envious. You know, fix that part. You know, instead of feeling guilty and thinking that you're an awful person for having a very human emotion.
Yeah, I saw a documentary about a sports star she's a Paralympian sports star, Ellie Simmons. She's got hypochondroplasia, which is a form of dwarfism, and so she was on television last week. She's been interviewed. She was being filmed going through her search and reunion process, and part of that was the social worker reading the notes from the conversations with her birth mother, and the birth mother felt guilty about her lack of bonding. So babies with hypochondroplasia look different, right? So their heads are bigger and than normal babies, and their limbs are smaller, shorter. And she felt guilt. This birth mom felt guilty about those feelings that she couldn't bond with her daughter. Felt guilty about wishing the daughter hadn't made it, you know, or that she'd known earlier. And it was a stunning moment when the social worker was reading out the other social workers' notes, and I was getting quite upset watching this. But this Ellie Simmons lady, she was viewing her birth mother with grace, viewing her birth mother with compassion, and far more compassion than I had. And I was just watching the TV, right? You know, she was in the heat of this. This was all about her. So it's big stuff. But yeah, forgiving ourselves for our feelings.
Mm-hmm. Or understanding our feelings, understanding that feelings are not bad or good. They just are. You know, they just are. You know, and not, you know, I think we live in a society where, you know, we're implicitly, you know, told, if you feel this, it's wrong. If you feel this, it's wrong. If you feel this, it's wrong. And that's where all this irrational guilt comes from, where people come to me and they're like, I feel guilty because of, you know, oh my God, you know, I thought this. And I'm thinking, really? You know, no, just strip the judgment away. Feelings are just feelings. Thoughts are just thoughts. What gives power to those feelings and thoughts is your actions. And if you're not acting on those feelings, well, then that's it. It's just a feeling and it's just a thought.
Yeah. Have you done a lot of kind of self-inquiry stuff on this yourself? Do you do a lot of journaling? I was thinking, you know, what can help us? What can help us do this? Because sometimes saying this stuff is easier than doing it.
I think a lot of so I think it's important that when you have a feeling that let's say something related to your adoption, right? A feeling that's uncomfortable, instead of pushing it away, you got to face it. You got to face it and try to understand it. Understanding is the genesis of growth. And wow, that was a gem. I like that one. Understanding is the gem. That came out of me. I can't believe it. Anyway.
I was going to say it's an absolute truth bomb, that.
Yes, I'm gonna copyright that one. So, but it's true. Understanding is the genesis of growth. And if we understand ourselves better, understand our feelings without judging them or putting a value, not value, yeah, like calling them good or bad, because I think that that's what keeps you from looking at those feelings. For example, the birth mother, right? Felt guilty for not bonding with her child who came out with this challenge, right? And she probably thought, I'm a horrible human being, whatever. Instead of judging the feeling, why do I feel this way? She could have been very scared to have had a child that had, that disability. The fear, the fear of judgment, possibly the shame, even though there's nothing to be ashamed about, but these are things that happen to you. And so if she would have looked at those feelings instead of running away from them, the guilt probably would have gone down, because there's nothing to feel guilty for. So I think not avoiding uncomfortable feelings is a way to understand why you're feeling that way.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the questions that's on my mind here is, we can go, so I didn't come out of the fog, whatever, till I hit 40. It's there, and it's buried, and then it comes up, right? And similar-ish age for you, right? What do you make of this kind of suppression thing? Because I when I hear the word suppression, it sounds to me like it's a conscious act. Mm-hmm. And that's not how it feels. That's not how it felt. Mm-hmm. Something came up. The teddy bear triggered the coming out of the fog at 40, but I hadn't been trying to stuff it down before that. It wasn't I don't know. Am I making any sense here? People talk about. So I wasn't conscious of any numbing. I wasn't aware of that. Mm-hmm. That feeling of being unloved by my birth mother. It's not like it's not something that I tried to hide or numb out. It just wasn't in my awareness. It just wasn't. I wasn't conscious of it.
Well, possibly, what it was is it wasn't a concrete thought that you woke up certain days and thought, my biological mother didn't love me. It's not like you were thinking that constantly. I think it's more of an abstract feeling, something that's abstract. And what's interesting is that it'll come out in other ways. I can only speak for myself.
Yeah.
This fear of rejection, personalizing certain things, thinking that it's rejection. And sometimes it was rejection. And now I'm able to say, you know what? Whatever. Maybe it has nothing to do with me. And if it has to do with me, the whole world isn't going to love me, right? Being able to accept that. So I think with you, the teddy bear just kind of challenged completely that abstract feeling of being or of feeling unloved by your biological mother. I think that was more it. What do you think?
I don't know. I'm 56 now, 16 years on, so I can't. It's hard for me to. It's hard for me to say. I know I'm thankful for it, right? If that hadn't happened, then we wouldn't be here.
We would be talking.
Yeah, we wouldn't be talking. I wouldn't be doing the work. I wouldn't have been on the journey since then, the journey that continues, and the whole thing, the whole reason for the podcast is to hold the guests' epiphanies.
Mm-hmm.
Have a conversation, hold a conversation about the guests' epiphanies,
mm-hmm.
in the hope that some of those epiphanies will lead to epiphanies amongst the listeners. That's why we're talking about epiphanies. That's why we're not talking about story.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the epiphanies, the gems, the insights, the aha moments, the epiphanettes. They're like epiphanies, only smaller, right? That's what we're in the business of, is pointing people to our epiphanies and saying, can this be a catalyst?
Of course. And I can tell you right now that after my epiphanies, I thrived. I grew. I mean, so did you. Look at where you are, right? At first it's scary and it feels uncomfortable and you're like, oh my God, what is this? But then you grow as a person, in your profession, with friends. I think it's a beautiful experience.
Yeah. So we've been extending the coming out of the fog metaphor recently on a few of these podcasts. So if we were to extend that metaphor, what do you think happens after we've come out of the fog? What is it that we're seeing, given that kind of weather metaphor?
I think you're seeing what's in front of you.
Yeah.
And what the future holds if you effectively deal with coming out of the fog, right? I've read a lot about adoption, and I know there's some adoptees that are like, I'm fine, this didn't affect me, I was adopted at 3 minutes old, so I'm fine. Well, are you? And I'm not saying that adoption is something that we have to pathologize. By all means, no. But come on. Your birth mother was under certain circumstances that she had to give up a child. Okay? That's scary. That's tough. That's deep, right? Give up a child and you were separated from the person you grew inside of. Okay, so when they come at me with, well, I was adopted so early, I don't even remember, my adopted parents were great. Okay, but trust me, I mean, that's a primal wound, I would say, to be separated, even if it's at 1 minute old from your biological mother, and I think it's important to realize that it's not that my adoption made me weird or mentally ill or depressed or anything like that. It might be the suppression, as you said, of those feelings that maybe you don't want to face. Facing feelings like this, Simon, is very uncomfortable. And that's why people run away from them. But it's important for growth, to understand and to see, coming out of the fog metaphor, to see what's in the horizon for you. And horizons are usually beautiful.
Yeah. So my take, when we've been exploring this other, extending the fog metaphor, what we've been I can't remember, it was a couple of episodes ago, and what I thought that we saw was basically we saw the trauma, right? So if we come out of the fog is stopping us seeing the clouds of trauma that are above the fog, right? So we see that the fog lifts and we see the dark storm clouds of the trauma. And then there's a little bit of blue light, a little bit of blue in the storm cloud. And we head for that, thinking that's where the lightness is. And then we come out at the other side of the cloud, the top side of the cloud, and we realize that we're the sky and we can look down on our trauma. Right? That's the way we've been talking about it in the last couple of episodes. And to extend the metaphor further, what we're doing here is what we've been talking about is looking in the clouds. So we've been in the clouds. We've been taking some samples of clouds. We've been looking at the nature of the cloud, what's in it, what the water, the moisture levels, all those sorts of things, right? That's what we've been thinking about. But what it seems to me is what, so that's kind of feels like my experience. But your experience is you can see what's right in front of you because of your training.
I think so, partially.
Because of what your training, things have clicked, and you've kind of maybe jumped ahead. You jumped a little stage that kind of non-psychotherapist would do. So as soon as you've seen the trauma, you've been able to, okay, I can see what's on the horizon now. Right. And that's I guess part of the benefit of all the years of training that you put in, right?
Yes.
How do you see what happens for other adoptee clients coming out of the fog?
Oh my gosh, Simon. 1 second, Simon.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
That was my Google Mail. I'm so sorry.
Okay, sorry.
For example, like adoptees that don't have my training.
Yeah. What? So they've come to you because they've come out of the fog. I guess if you're in the fog, you don't need to see a psychotherapist because you have
no awareness.
A conscious problem. Yeah, you haven't got the awareness of a problem, right? So what do you see in terms of what they see next? What's your perspective on what your clients see after working with you?
On it, okay, so I don't think you have to be a psychotherapist for that to happen.
Okay.
I think what you have to have is a good amount of self-awareness and self-understanding. I think you did it, Simon. I mean, I guess you're saying that your healing took a little longer. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that there was an intermediary stage. Yeah. So I went fog, cloud, sunshine. You went fog, sunshine.
Yes. And I think it's important for adoptees, that come out of the fog to realize that there's going to be some pain in certain epiphanies. Okay. There's going to be some pain. And that's what I see for people that possibly didn't have the self-awareness and all of a sudden they have it. Okay. Either by accident or by force. Right. So, or by design. So I think that, they can expect some pain. They can expect, depending on their story, maybe some boundary setting. maybe some difficult conversations. I mean, I don't know if that happened to you, Simon, with maybe your biological parent, with your, I'm sorry, your adoptive parents, and maybe facing very difficult feelings that you didn't want to face, but realizing that once you get through that intermediary stage, or I'm like slaughtering that word, you see the horizon.
Yeah. Okay. So it's about being in the SH1T, but keeping going, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Rather than that numbing out, I guess.
Right. I think once you're on, I think once you have the epiphany and you're on that journey, you don't turn back. I don't think there's any turning back. And even if you try to turn back, it's kind of going to force you to look forward.
Yeah.
Because now you have this self-awareness that you didn't have before. You can't just erase that self-awareness.
No, the genie's out of the bottle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but for my own experience, there were some pauses along the way. So there was, doing my search for my birth mum, there was a pause along the way, and then there was another breaking open moment, another epiphany moment that led me to restart. Mm-hmm. So to restart the search. Right. So, looking at it, and I think this is a big thing for all of us, is it's a number of epiphanies. It's not once and done.
Right. Absolutely. It's a number of epiphanies. And if you don't know who your biological parents are, you're in for a whole lot of epiphany. Yeah. Yeah. You're in for a world of epiphanies, right? Yeah. Especially if you find them.
Yeah. So I haven't said this on the podcast for a while, but I did say it, I don't know, a few episodes back. So one of the questions that I've always had is, when I'm listening to an audio book or a podcast, is, well, how do I do that? And so I sometimes say this to the listeners, if you're asking how, then the answer is you're already doing it, because you're listening to two adoptees, one who's a psychotherapist, talking about epiphanies. So you're in the right place. You're hanging out at the right place. You're at the bus stop for epiphanies. Did I say that earlier on? That you're at the bus stop for epiphanies, but the thing that every metaphor has its limitation, and most buses have a timetable, but there's no timetable for epiphanies, right? They come when you come. So they came for you whilst you're having a meal with your two daughters. Mm-hmm. Something comes out of the blue.
Out of the blue, like a little lightning bolt.
It's unsurprised. Yeah. Out of the blue. Mm-hmm. So we've covered quite a lot of ground. Is there anything else that I've not asked you about? Because I've been very very definitely kind of feeling my way through this podcast. Bit trickier ground, I think, for me somehow than some other stuff that I've been talking about recently. So,
well, it's more emotional. Yeah. It's more of an emotional podcast, I think. Yeah. The emotions surrounding epiphanies, I guess we can call it.
Yeah. It's fresher ground. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's fresher ground. Mm-hmm. So, is there anything else that you'd like to share, Cristina?
No, Simon, that's it. I hope people listen and navigate their way through their little epiphanies.
Yeah. And okay, last question. Have you got a title for this interview? Does a title come to your mind?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Understanding is the genesis of growth. I am amazed with that one.
Yeah. Well, if you didn't say that, I was going to say it. So, so we're as one as that. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Cristina, and thank you for listening. listeners, and thank you for bearing with me as I perhaps stumbled. As Cristina said, it's a little bit more emotional, this stuff, so I've been a little bit slower on the on the uptake and with the questions. Yeah, thank you very much, listeners. Thank you, Cristina. We'll speak to you again very soon. Bye-bye.